Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see so many in the parish hall. Anybody would think we were proposing to double the rates. No, but it really is great, and I welcome you to this senatorial hustings. Because I'm the only one on the platform without a nameplate, my name's Len Norman, and I'm the Constable of St Clement. I welcome you. I also welcome the 17 candidates to God's own parish. Now, before we begin, I have a short statement to make. Before we begin, candidate Anthony Lewis has asked me to say a few words on his behalf, which all the other candidates are more than happy for me to do. As you may be aware, Anthony has aphasia, a speech and language disorder caused by a serious stroke 10 years ago. Anthony is taking a full part in the senatorial campaign, but his difficulties with language means that the traditional hustings format of questions without notice is not practical for him, so he will not be answering questions tonight. Aphasia is a condition that affects communication, but not ability. He will be responding to questions online on his Facebook page, and he will also be holding a number of surgeries which are better formats for his particular disability. Anthony has asked me to thank you for your understanding. Now, the format for this evening is each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak to us. A bell will sound 20 seconds before those 3 minutes are up, and again when the 3 minutes has elapsed, at which, if the candidate is still speaking, I will cut them off. So there you go. To be fair to everybody, And if I could just remind candidates when they finish speaking to turn their mic off, please. The candidates, after everyone has had their 3 minutes, there will be questions, and I'll explain how we will do that at that time. The candidates have drawn lots for the order of speaking, and the first candidate I invite to address us is Senator Sarah Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Connétable. Now, the proposed immigration policy is that immigration should not exceed the average of that since 2001, which is 700 people a year. Statistics Jersey say that at that rate, by 2035, we will require 185 Le Marais blocks and 6 new primary schools. And where will we house them? We built about 1,200 houses over the past 4 years, compared with an actual immigration of 4,200 over the same period. Andium and the housing trusts are making attempts to provide more housing, but they're being squeezed into the urban areas. Additional housing sites must be addressed in the 2020 Island Plan, as well as adopting work permits. We need sites for affordable housing and housing for our older population who want to downsize. No one would deny the benefits of fresh ideas being brought into the island, but the strain on infrastructure caused by uncontrolled immigration is worrying. It is one of the factors contributing to the shortage of housing. Demand is too high. And while we are at it, let us not talk about the problem of the aging population. That's rubbish. Who is looking after children in the holidays? The grandparents. Who is doing much of the volunteering in the island? The aging population. Who is doing much of the caring in the island? The aging population. That is, when they're not climbing Kilimanjaro, hiking through the Pampas, or trekking across Iceland. It is time we stopped writing them off and started appreciating them and paying more attention to the way they're being treated. It is unlikely that the hospital planning review will be completed before September. There is time to make a final comparison of the sites for the hospital. This should be done urgently to allay public uncertainty. We must examine income and expenditure. Over the past 15 years, budgeted income has grown by some 75%, whilst expenditure has grown by some 79%. This is a narrow margin and is very tight budgeting. In the current budget, the estimated surplus by 2019 is $332,000, less than the average cost of a 3-bedroom house. There's a lot more work to do. You will hear many promises during this election. I merely ask you to ask, how much will it cost and where will the money come from? Please remember, your vote is your voice. Please use it, preferably for Sarah Ferguson, but you must use it.
I call upon Mr. Phil Maguire.
Hello again. When I first stood back in 2010, one of the two things that I was standing against was the fact that the Income Tax Department was showing a willful disregard for the law. Now, thanks in no small part, I'm sure, to a then Deputy Gorst, we fixed that, and the Income Tax Department went back to mending its ways. The problem is, ever since that deputy has gone on to become Chief Minister, it seems that the Income Tax Department thinks that he's too busy to notice them breaking the law again, and they appear to be right. The really bad news is that the other departments are now noticing this and are following suit. One of those is Social Security. Now, Social Security break the law by independently recalculating your income. They do this, of course, so that you get you have to pay a higher amount, and also because you get less benefits. Let's take an example. There's somebody called Paul. He was a gardener and handyman, and for about 40 years he diligently paid his Social Security. Then he got cancer, couldn't work anymore, feeling too ill. So he turned to the Social Security Department for support that he'd paid for. And he got a letter saying, "Dear sir, thanks to the way that we've recalculated your income, you are now £2 a month over the limit, and you're not going to receive a penny." Now, I'd like to ask the people involved with that, the Minister and the Social Security Department, how did it feel to steal from a dying man? And did you feel good about the amount of money he saved? I hate to disappoint you, because he died a few months later, so it wasn't that much money anyway. I've simply like to end at this point by leaving you with two questions to ponder. The first is, how many other people are in the same position who have been denied what is their legal right and what they paid for? And how bad is this situation? The second question I'd like to leave you with is, how come I know about this and the other 11 standing members don't? How come, how does it? I mean, it's not like I went looking for this information. Or is it just the fact that ordinary people and their problems aren't that important when you have a finance industry and a construction industry to support?
Next speaker is Deputy Sam MEZEC.
Oh, friends, ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic turnout this evening. Maybe we should have held the hustings out on the beach earlier in the sunshine. My name is Sam MEZEC, and I've been the Deputy of St Helier No. 2 for the last 4 years now. I'm standing for election alongside 17 other Reform Jersey candidates, 2 of whom are standing in this parish, because we want to play a constructive and positive role in the next government of Jersey, with our #1 aim being to improve the standard of living for islanders. It's time for change, and it's time we had a government which represented ordinary islanders and was focused on making all of our lives better. Over the last 10 years, the gap between the haves and the have-nots has gotten wider. We are now a more unequal society than the UK, and poverty has drastically risen. We've seen many of our public services deteriorate, whilst millions continue to be wasted by the government. This, in one of the wealthiest societies on the planet, is not inevitable. Jersey has the potential to be a beacon of equality, of prosperity, of environmentalism, if only we had a government with a clear vision of how to get there. So that's why we're standing for election as a team, committed to this change. If you elect me and other Reform Jersey candidates, we will be an unsilenceable voice for working people to make sure that no one is left behind by the government, and we'll aim to raise the standard of living of all of us. It is not right that islanders have seen their earnings flatline and support for the vulnerable has been cut, whilst the state has allowed its attention to drift in other directions. Jersey deserves so much better than this. More has got to be done to raise the incomes of the low paid, which is why we're pledging to raise the minimum wage to £10 an hour by 2022. More must be done to support Jersey's businesses beyond just providing positive PR or setting up new quangos. That's why we're pledging to reduce Class 2 social security contributions for the self-employed. And our young people deserve to have the best opportunities for a decent and fulfilling career, irrespective of their family's financial circumstance, which is why we're pledging to support higher education funding reform without cutting other areas of the education budget. We've published a full manifesto which can be found on our website, which outlines our 10 key pledges, which we can guarantee we'll work on implementing if we're elected. If the people of Jersey offer us the opportunity to take a leading role in the next government, we will not let you down. A better Jersey is possible. We are determined to make it happen, so we have a government which represents the interests of ordinary islanders, and we can see a more prosperous future to be shared by all of us and not just a small number of people, as has been the case over recent years. So on the 16th of May, please vote for me, Sam MEZEC, and your local Reform Jersey candidates. Thank you very much.
I ask Deputy KRISTINA Moore to address us.
Thank you and good evening, St Clement. It's very good of you all to come out on this lovely evening. Politics is about people, and this is your opportunity, of course, to select your representatives. For me, the best part of an election campaign is canvassing. It's a privilege to connect with so many people on their own doorsteps. This Saturday, I visited with some people in your own parish. The most consistent message I heard was that St Clement, along with St Helier, is taking the brunt of development. My campaign is about balancing competing priorities to find a better way to lead the island to a sustainable future. Those priorities are the economy, environment and community. We have an economy that performs well, and we need to keep it that way. The more successful businesses, the more revenue we will raise to provide healthcare, education and to help those in need. In a world of rapid change, it's essential to adapt to boost skills and productivity to remain competitive and successful. We all cherish our beautiful environment and coastline. We also need to protect it. To improve water, air and soil quality. We can reduce traffic congestion on our roads and minimise waste. We can become a plastic-free island. Our community is safe and friendly. This also needs to be protected. I will champion the needs of our elders, I embrace diversity and inclusion, and will seek improvements within our mental health services so that people receive help before experiencing a crisis in their lives. When making decisions, we need to take all three of these issues into account to deliver a positive result for each and every person. The pressures here in St Clement are a good example. Many people need affordable homes. Many people struggle to get on the housing ladder, with high housing costs leading to financial hardship. This harms families, as the Children's Commissioner has so eloquently described. But these homes can't all be built in St Clement. Other parishes have to contribute too, which is why I support the building on a greenfield site to provide 65 affordable homes for a parish scheme in St Peter. I'm not arguing that we turn every field over for development. The plan was for 10 vergees, that's 0.0003% of the total area farmed in the island. Every parish could consult, develop a parish plan, just like St Peter's. We can respond to need rather than pushing the reality of an affordable home further away from the families who need them. Experience has taught me that islanders want to see brave and clear leadership from people with compassion who will listen and take action based on the facts. A vote for More means that you will get a positive voice and a better future. Please vote More for Jersey.
I call upon Senator Ian Gorst.
Monsieur le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's a pleasure for me to be here in St Clement. I stood for elected office to make a difference and to provide hope for the future. This election is about change. As Chief Minister, I've guided our island through some of the most difficult economic and social challenges we have faced. But over the next 4 years, we face challenges that will set our future course as a community for many years to come. We face the uncertainty of Brexit. We face international uncertainty, and we face the uncertainty of the EU. I know that we have suffered the effects of the global financial crisis, and I understand that the effects of the Great Recession and what those effects have been on families' budgets. Jersey is a great place, and we have made significant progress across the community. But I am not satisfied. There is more that I want to see achieved, and I have three main aims. Firstly, effective economic leadership. That means protecting and building on the many good things that we find in island life, so supporting the businesses that are already here and encouraging development and diversification. Because our economic strength has not happened by accident. I will continue to represent Jersey's economy and way of life on the international stage, defending our reputation in the EU and elsewhere, and promoting investment and trade. I want and have always wanted to ensure that all islanders share in this success. That's why, secondly, one of my aims is improving the lives of islanders by building on what we've achieved so far. And I want to do more. That's why I'm proposing an Affordable Housing Commission, a coming together of the community to drive out costs and increase supply. A refocusing of the competition regulator, driving down the cost of living. A building on the long-term care scheme, providing government support at parish level. And post the care inquiry, I'm proposing a new contract with children and young people. Thirdly, we must transform government and the public sector. We started, there's more to do. Driving out waste and focusing on serving islanders. When we work together, we can achieve change and a better way. I stand for hope for the future so that you don't risk yours. I would appreciate one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you very much.
I now invite Mr. Stevie Ocean to address us.
Merci, Monsieur Connétable, le committee. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see a great turnout here tonight. Now, before I start, I'm remaining sitting because I'm 6'2". I'm way away from the mic on the base station, and you can hear me, but I can't hear myself. So I don't want that happening, so there's no disrespect whatsoever. First of all, let me go into what I did. Basically, back in 2016, I stood in the by-election. And what did I achieve? Quite a bit, actually, and you'll be quite surprised. I managed to get the letters UK removed from the 5 of our islands with an argument with Google. And that's not funny at all. It's quite serious. I'm actually in the process of, on the backs of Twitter at the moment and LinkedIn, to recognise Jersey is nothing to do with the United Kingdom whatsoever. And I'm so fed up with the comparison that everybody keeps on making between Jersey and the UK. We are not part of the UK. This place is unique and remains unique. And that's one of my points. On the point of immigration, we need a proper immigration policy. And I mean a proper immigration policy because I can't go into detail because it's too long-winded. But what I will say is people that come into this island illegally and because they haven't been vetted. Also housing, yes, the old chestnut of not in my backyard. Well, as KRISTINA said earlier on, let's talk about not concentrating on 2 parishes, but spreading this out throughout the island. There's a lot of area which could be used that back in 1987 had greenhouses on it, and consequently those greenhouses have been destroyed and still remain. That land has never been used or neutralised. It's never been used for agriculture. It just sat there. Those places could be used for housing on a small basis projects. Health and well-being. We must educate and re-educate people on the point of mental health. This is a very, very important fact because any one of you in this room could suffer from it, and it can happen to any one of us, and that is a fact. Tourism, I would like to see diversification, and there is diversification that is possible. On one of the points, and I'm going to make this very, very clear indeed, respect for drivers. Now, I've got respect for pedestrians. Pedestrians have got no respect for us. And I'm not talking about the tragic event that happened in Tunnel Street. I'm talking about the area around the Pomodoro Hotel, Conway Street, and Charing Cross, where people cross the road, don't even look. There is a jaywalking law, and it can be enforced. It's never been done so, but let's sort of talk about that. Anyway, on the 16th of May, vote for me. Thank you very much.
I now call upon Deputy Tracey Valois.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tracey Valois. I've served as a States member for 9.5 years as a Deputy of St Saviour and a Deputy of St John. I've carried out numerous roles during this time that have either had an influence or a direct impact on policies and legislation. I have served as an Assistant Minister in both Education and Treasury, as the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee and President of the Scrutiny Chairman's Committee, and been party to approximately 50 reviews. From the Care of Children Review, which holds ministers to account for following through the recommendations of the Care Inquiry, to higher education funding, income support and the Housing Transformation Programme. The role of a States member is not one to be taken lightly, nor is it one that any one person can claim they managed to do on their own. I have proven that I am able and willing to work with all members on very pressing matters which have challenged and continue to challenge our island. At a time of uncertainty for both residents and business, we need the public sector and the political representatives who govern them to listen, lead and learn with honesty, integrity and respect. During the next term, we will see a great deal of change, not just within the political arena, but from the impacts of Brexit, a new island plan and from within the public sector. We have a number of laws and policies which do not stand up to scrutiny. It will be vital for those who are elected to work as a team, take politics back to basics, engage and communicate in an effective way to enable, support and provide for islanders for the long term. Opportunities are endless if we provide the correct frameworks for people to thrive. Controls around population need to be considered on an individual basis rather than through business. We require the requisite skills to assist business, but at the same time we need to recognise the impact it may have on public services and the ability to provide sufficient supply for the demand, particularly in the provision of adequate housing. Our personal tax system needs to address the role of allowances against direct funding, such as nursery education, and join up with the system of income support to assess the impact and functioning of both, particularly for in-work benefits. There is a need to ingrain a fairness into our processes so people feel supported and not threatened, and create a light at the end of the tunnel for those on the never-ending cycle of support who are desperate to break out, ensuring those on middle incomes are able to be financially independent in reality and not just in statistics. I have the tenacity, drive and experience to get the ball rolling on many of these issues, and I want to do it in partnership with you, the people of Jersey. Please consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you.
I now invite Senator Lyndon Farnham to address us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In November 2014, I was appointed Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, and I have worked on behalf of islanders since then to deliver strong and sustainable growth across all sectors of the economy. Maintaining a strong economy is important not only because it provides new jobs and career opportunities, but also creates the wealth required to help those in our community who find themselves in need, and allow society to develop in a sustainable fashion. This evening, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to talk briefly about education, and at the risk of sustaining Senator Ferguson's wrath, our young people. One of the recommendations from the from the Care Inquiry was that the Children's Commissioner be appointed. This was quickly implemented, and she is now in office. And it is her role to listen to children to find out what's important to them and to use that information to influence government and other organisations who have responsibility for making a difference to children's lives. This is an important role and will play a key part in facilitating many further care inquiry recommendations. It is also important for our young people to leave school having achieved their potential, both academically and physically, in order to give them the best possible start in life. I fully support moves by schools to place more focus on character development, good citizenship, life skills and the teaching of our own heritage, history and local politics. This morning, together with other election candidates, I attended a briefing by the Jersey Construction Council and was struck by the high demand for skilled trades and skilled trades personnel and the difficulty currently being faced in obtaining them. In 2017, the island produced 156 apprenticeships. Now that's good, but we need to do better if we are to satisfy the demand for skilled labour. Now, not all children will want an academic career, which is why we must do more to teach and encourage vocational skills, and yes, even on-the-job training from a much earlier age. In addition, we must invest in either upgrading Highlands College or consider building a new technical and trades college so we can harness the talent available and produce many more local tradesmen and women. I wanted to also add that I support the introduction of a sustainable funding solution for new higher education student grant scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, Jersey is in good shape and we need to keep it that way. To do that, we will need to elect serious people, people with a positive vision. Highly experienced people are committed to attaining that goal. And your next States Assembly must make greater efforts to find the common ground between us. The people we represent deserve and demand that we as an Assembly become more decisive. And I hope you will remember that when you vote on the 16th of May. Thank you.
I now ask Mr. Ant Lewis to address us.
St. Clement Constable Len Norman, well done. You have never seen a candidate like me before. I am different. I have a different campaign and a different voice, but different is what Jersey needs. My stroke has left me disabled, but it has given me courage, determination and new insight. I will represent those who, like me, don't have a voice. Not just the disabled but everyone who feels that today's politicians don't speak for them. What is the future for Jersey? Where do we want to go? My focus includes the environment, equality, and community. We need to improve the community of Jersey. We need to improve the environment. It will cost money, but it is an investment for my children and your children. There is no clear voice for the environment in the current states. There can be no silos. We need to share more information. Equality. I bring a new perspective, one formed by both success and hardship. I believe mental health provision must be higher up the political agenda. More understanding and reduced stigma. Where we see inequality and stigma in Jersey, it should be fought. We need less old boys club. We are improving and have more cosmopolitan living. To create a more equal island. The dangers of having an island of haves and have-nots. I believe that the most marginalized and downtrodden members of our society have something to contribute. From the inmate at Lamoy to the homeless man in the parade. We all have insights and abilities to help make Jersey a better place to live. The different communities in Jersey. Everyone has skills and talents. Everyone. We need a system that allows those talents to flourish. The first step is to break down our own inbuilt stigmas. That is a role of education and defining common goals. Our children and their schooling hold the key. It is then identifying those abilities and channeling them where they are most needed. We need more social enterprises to create businesses and programs that build on our social capital. Like my campaign headquarters, the Beresford Street Kitchen. Communities working together makes us all stronger, and it starts at school. We also need greater recognition of support. The voluntary sector. With more effort from the states, we can better coordinate the work that charities do. I will be the first person with aphasia to stand for the states. I appreciate that that makes me different. I hope that I will be able to represent islanders who don't always fit in with the norm. If you believe in these things too, then vote for me and together, we can make a change. Thank you.
Now it's the turn of Deputy John Lafondre.
Monsieur le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm John Lafondre. I've had the privilege of representing St Lawrence as deputy for the past 12 and a half years. But tonight, I'm seeking your support to receive an island mandate. Now, in just over 28 days, 8 of the people in front of you will be elected as senators. States members deal with complex legislation, expensive projects, large sums of expenditure, and we are representing the island more on an international basis than we used to. So, for example, I work on l'Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, and I'm also the Jersey representative of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. This is about promoting the island to overseas politicians. For example, explaining why we are of benefit to the United Kingdom and our very unique position with Europe. That is all extremely relevant in the context of Brexit and ultimately our economy. Professionally, I'm a chartered accountant, which is very useful when we're looking at states' expenditure, and I've also been Honorary Secretary of Laveau Housing Trust for over 20 years, which gives me first-hand experience of the difficulties in providing social housing on this island. In the past, I've been an Assistant Minister, but this term I chose to go to scrutiny, and as President of Scrutiny and Chairman of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, it's been our job to try to hold ministers to account. It's been a hard 3.5 years. We've looked at many subjects, including the Finance Centre, the hospital, Brexit, and most recently a high-level review of population policy. We issued the first legal summons ever made by Scrutiny, which shows our determination to hold people to account, to get information, and I'm delighted that the states recently approved 2 proposals brought by me as President, one of which means we can put witnesses under oath should we need to. It is clear that whilst Jersey is still a fantastic place to live, we do have challenges ahead. These include, as we've heard, the increasing population versus the need of businesses for flexibility in employment, the provision of affordable housing versus how we protect green space. And also, I'm hugely passionate about the proper implementation of public sector reform, finally getting rid of the silo mentality. It will save us millions of pounds, but we need to be clear as to how it is being implemented. And there will also be other opportunities as well. Our future belongs to the brave, not the faint-hearted, to those who are prepared to grapple with and understand these issues. And I hope I've clearly demonstrated as an accountant my approach is considered, it's thoughtful, and I look at the long term. I am prepared to listen, and I will work hard to get to a solution. And at this time, we need proven political experience. I hope you will consider I can provide that, and consider me for one of your votes for Senator in May. Thank you.
We will now hear from Mr. GINO RISOLI.
Good evening, everyone. Our ministerial government does not work. It's broken. Half of the representation is ineffective because power is centralised. It has resulted in lost basic principles, which in turn has delivered poor and flawed legislation. We have come to expect too little from government and too little from life. Our lives should be exceptional. Government today has an insatiable appetite for money. I will put a stop to this. We need accountable government. I can deliver this by preparing legislation for detailed financial accountability to be online for you. This is important because the detail of government's spending is what they're doing, not what they say they're doing. And the waste is colossal. Protection politics cannot keep us safe today in a fast-changing world. It's not the job of government to create wealth. It's your job. The job of government is to provide services that the public deem important. The public The economy belongs to the working people and businesses. Government must set the rules, but in so doing must not inhibit the latter. Freedom for large and small companies are imperative. It is imperative. It should never be the responsibility of business to pay for welfare. The responsibility of welfare is government. It must always be funded by collective taxation. Businesses have already a huge responsibility in providing jobs and services. Anything that impedes the latter will always be counterproductive. Secondly, we need a skilled and unskilled manual workers. No one in society is any more important than another. How, on one hand, can a government give help to the needy, paying everything from their rents to food to clothing, electricity and the like, and not provide affordable homes to those that work hard and pay their taxes to fund that welfare? It makes no sense at all. Homes must be affordable for those on lower incomes. It's the responsibility of government to meet this need. Therefore, state housing rents must reflect this reality. There is no such thing as an average wage. I would say that state's rental should fall by 40%. A two-bedroom flat should be no more than £800 a calendar month. To all those in government that have stood, I thank them very much, but it's my belief that we need new ideas. I have an abundance of ideas. I will change how the states are elected because we need better representation. A vote for me will transform government. I want Jersey to be the envy of the international circuit for the very best of reasons. Tourism industry will be replenished, and with the example we set.
Thank you, Mr. Risoli.
The economy must serve.
I now invite Mr. Gerard Baudin to address us.
Monsieur le Connétable, prisoners and Clement, good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Gerard Baudin. Tonight I'd like to start with our present government's achievements. Well, that didn't take long. What are their failures? Where do you start? I mean, take the new hospital. It's a disaster before it's even started. What happened to our 90,000 population policy? We borrowed £250 million. It'll be 600 with interest, to build 1,000 new houses, which we wouldn't need if that policy had been followed. Ministers actually encouraged immigration. Now we're told within 15 years we're going to need, 10 new schools and 230 new high-rise blocks of flats. And now they want to land a seaplane outside the harbour amongst all the pleasure boats. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? We blame politicians, but it's not their fault, it's ours. I mean that because it was us who elected them. At each election, we hope the new bunch will do better, but each time it gets worse. As Einstein once said, only a lunatic would keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So what are we doing wrong? Well, traditionally, we choose candidates by manifestos addressing all the usual unsolved problems. But the present system doesn't allow those promises to be pursued. One retiring politician called it unwieldy and complicated. Another said you're outflanked and outnumbered, and trying to achieve anything is extremely difficult. Now, as I said, the problem is the system and not the members. And until we change that, more of the same is guaranteed, and I'm just not sure how much more of the same Jersey can stand. We have to get away from adversarial politics and back to a system where all members and talents are used constructively. Of course, we can't change the system, but we can elect those who will. And only voting for candidates who promise to overhaul our present dictatorship will achieve that. What can I do? Well, under the committee system, I served on the Telecoms, Housing and Public Services Committees. Under ministerial, I served on the Shadow Scrutiny Panel, the Planning Applications Panel. I was Vice Chair of the Environment Scrutiny Panel, member of the Privilege and Procedures Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, the Law Revision Board, and various other working parties. So I have the experience, and I know how the system works. Others will confirm I also have the determination and courage necessary to deliver in the States. If elected, I promise to drive reform of ministerial government, but I can't do it on my own. Only by electing enough like-minded candidates prepared to revise the system will you enable change to come about. Thank you for listening, and I would be honoured to receive one of your votes on May the 16th.
We'll now hear from Ms. Moz Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Conatable. Good evening, everybody. Before I lived in St Brelard, I lived in St Clement. So this part of the South Coast is really quite dear to me. There's a lot of changes happening lately, and what the island really needs now are people who understand the need for a strong economy, because it's all very well saying we're going to do this and that, but if you don't have the money to pay for it, we're not going to get very far. We also need people who understand the meaning of leadership and the meaning of policies, which they shouldn't be wish lists. We need proper strategies with joined up thinking. And unfortunately, there hasn't been much of that lately in government. But there are changes afoot. But if you've got ministers who are over-reliant on a civil service that needs reform, you may not get very far. So you need people who actually know what needs to be done. And I do know what needs to be done. I have a background as a tax lawyer, so I do know of how to look at tax reform. I have a background as a former lawyer, a partner in a local law firm, and I have a background as a leadership trainer. So I do know what leadership training is too. And if I am elected, sorry, I also forgot about St Brelard's Bay Association, because I've learned a lot about planning too, and I do feel that this part of the island has been neglected there. Planning should be planning, and, well, there's too many conflicting policies that need to be, hard decisions need to be made sometimes, certainly with respect to things like affordable housing. You can't just say, oh, that will be green zone land. No, it won't. You've got to be clear. We need proper designation in the island plan of what we want where. If I am elected, I'm going to be focusing on what we need to really get change, and that is the reform of the States Assembly. It needs to be more representative, not just at a parish level, but island-wide too. I'm also going to be focusing on the need to have changes that support a strong economy. And there are quite a few things we need to do there. Because yes, we do have a problem in terms of the sudden growth in our population. We need to look a bit more closely at these immigration proposals. And there are many other things too, which I'm describing in my manifesto, which you can find online at votemoz.je. I'm standing as a senator because I want to do what's best for the whole island and not just a single parish. So thank you. Please consider me for one of your votes.
Now call upon Mr. Frank Luce. Mr. Luce.
Thank you. Good evening, St Clements. My name is Frank Luce. Thank you for attending this hustings tonight, and thank you for ensuring that your name be on the electoral roll, enabling you to vote. Your vote and how you vote has never been so important. We are facing a landmark election. You are going to shape the future of the next government for all islanders. You, the minority, are going to carry the apathetic majority into better government by your choice of candidates before you tonight. Never before has the gap between the government and the electorate been greater. Islanders are so appalled by the antics of the present sitting states members, they have turned their back on politics and have lost total faith, and feel angry that their opinions are completely ignored by elected members once they get into government. Frankly, reading letters to the editor in the Jersey Evening Post should be made compulsory reading for all states members. The appalling success of low voting turnout since the war was testimony to the contempt Islanders have for standing government. The situation can only be reversed by better government made up of members who first and foremost listen to the people and shape their policies to make government inclusive to the electorate. Then and only then will the general public feel included, in touch, and this will result in a greater desire to vote. In the meantime, and for this most important election, your vote will speak for all islanders. Potential voters see the system of government in Jersey as bad. They want nothing to do with it. That was an opinion held by me. However, the present Assembly have horrified me to such an extent that I am now before you asking for your vote so that I may represent the thoughts, feelings and opinions of islanders in the Chamber itself. I want to have a strong and significant input in two long outstanding issues, the hospital saga, which is frankly a disaster, and the independent inquiry into the lifeboat power and personality struggle the present government does not wish to happen. To face in new Assembly the looming priorities of Brexit and population control, and ensure that agriculture and tourism are better supported to form a holy trinity of business sectors along with the finance industry. I want to work for a listening States Chamber that puts islanders first. For that I need your confidence and support and, of course, your vote. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you, and I hope to meet you and be of service to you for the next momentous 4 years. For your ballot paper, the name is LUCE, Frank LUCE. Thanks and good evening to you all.
It's now the turn of Constable Steve Pallett.
Constable parishioners, good evening. My name is Steve Pallett. I'm currently the Constable of St Brellard's. In this election, I'm standing for Senator because I believe that I have the energy, leadership and experience to play an active role in the island's next government. In this election, I'm going to be focusing on a number of issues, but time does not allow me to speak about each of these this evening. But tonight, I should be focusing on affordable housing and making Jersey more active. You, the parishioners of St Clement's, do not need anybody to tell you that land in Jersey is scarce. Indeed, you have over many years contributed your fair share towards resolving Jersey's housing problem, including the scheme approved not so long ago at Samurai that your Conotard fought hard to prevent due to concerns over traffic and access and other issues. But even in spite of your efforts, we still have a shortage of affordable housing for our youngsters. It is not right that our young islanders are not afforded the same opportunities that were presented to us. We have already failed at least one generation, and we cannot fail another. Indeed, if we're going to address our skills shortage and look to encourage young islanders to return to Jersey, then we need to offer young families the necessity, the hope of affordable housing. If elected, I want to work with the parishes to identify 500 sites around the island, and not just in St Clement's and St Helier, for truly affordable housing homes. It is my hope that the site that was recently turned down in St Peter can be reconsidered in short order, so that young families in the parish can realise their dream of their own home. Capped at £300,000 for a 3-bed home, these properties should remain in the first-time buyer category if ever sold. But it's not just the construction of homes that is essential. It's important for any plans for development are in keeping with our island, and that sufficient open space is provided for within any development. Open space is essential if we are to improve islanders' physical and mental well-being. I want to lead on a new strategy called Active Jersey to replace our Fit for Future, our current sports strategy. By taking a broader view of healthy lifestyles, Active Jersey will look to increase availability and accessibility to indoor and outdoor amenities. Active Jersey will enhance islanders' sense of well-being and identity, and Active Jersey will set targets to reduce and prevent illnesses and obesity. Through the promotion of healthier lifestyles, Active Jersey will look to support all within our community and will not be dependent on wealth, age or gender. Ladies and gentlemen, it's only if we work together that we can have an active future and improve access to affordable housing. I believe I have the energy, leadership and experience to get the ball rolling. Please consider me for one of your votes on 16th of May.
I now invite Deputy Simon Bree to address us.
Good evening. My apologies, turn my mic on, might help. Good evening, Monsieur le Conotable, ladies and gentlemen. I am Simon Bree. I'm proud to be a Jerseyman and honoured to be a deputy for St Clement. There are major issues facing our island, and these have a direct impact on the daily lives of every one of us. Unless we tackle these issues now, our way of life and our island will change forever. Brexit is looming and has unknown impacts on our economy. The population growth over the last few years, if left unchecked and uncontrolled, will have serious consequences on our way of life. That a tenth of the countryside has been taken out of agricultural use this decade shows the potential impact. I am against the wholesale development of greenfield sites, but fully support the parishes in delivering small-scale, affordable home developments, even though it may mean the loss of some green fields. Much sooner these than large-scale developments of concrete and steel. That we have unseen poverty on this island is something that should shame all of us. We need to reduce the financial burden placed on middle to low-income families by reducing the cost and size of the public sector. This does not mean reducing services. Simply raising taxes is not the answer. This election offers a real opportunity for change. It is time for your voice to be heard. Politics in Jersey has become polarised, so let us regain the middle ground. Let us have a government that has a social responsibility and is not a soulless corporate entity. I am standing for Senator because I believe that a new generation of politicians is needed, who understand the importance of the finance industry to the island's economy and prosperity, who understand the pressures and difficulties facing small businesses, who have the political experience, demonstrable work ethic, and proven ability to stand up for what they believe in, who are prepared to listen to the people, and who will represent you with a truly independent voice. Working together, we can make a real positive difference to the lives of every member of our society. I would be honoured to receive your vote. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Mr. Gordon Troy. Mr. Troy.
Thank you, Conotab. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for a great turnout in St Clement's. I can tell you're obviously all very concerned about our island, as I am. My name's Gordon George Troy, and I was Jersey born in 1954, educated at De La Salle College, and I'm passionate about my island. I do love it. And politics has been in my family for an awful long time. Since I was born, there have been Troys or Shentons in the States up until the last term. I'm very concerned about taxation. We seem to be getting taxation in a number of forms. I've been concerned about taxation and was going to stand for Senator when GST was introduced. And it was a pay cut for every Jersey resident. And I knew this tax would hit the most vulnerable in our society, the poor, the pensioner, working families with young children, and small struggling businesses. And my aim now, if elected, would be to keep it pegged at 5% and raise tax thresholds so that small income families and pensioners would pay less. I'm totally against increased taxation and use a pay system, which seems to be another form of tax. And there's one part of the community I'm very concerned about, and it's pensioners. I'm passionate about helping the senior citizen in our society. The Jersey pensioner has for a long time been politically overlooked. The pension scheme is meant to help people achieve and maintain financial independence. In my opinion, it falls well short of this. One of my main political aims, if elected, will be to assist pensioners to get better pension benefits, better healthcare, and better housing designed to meet their needs. Our senior citizens have helped create our island's prosperity. We must do our very best to look after them. Now, we've heard about the minimum wage. Now we're hearing about the livable wage. But we've never heard a word about a livable pension. And this is a word I will use every day if I'm elected. So you can expect me to be 100% behind the pensioner. I aim to be the pensioner's friend. And I would like to see, if elected, because Jersey is a unique place, people and culture, we must protect all that we believe makes our island a special place to live in. And it really is a special place. And I hope you will give me your vote in the future. Thanks.
Well, that completes the first part of this hustings. We're now going to move to question time. We're planning to finish at about 9:30, so to get as many questions in as possible, and of course there will not be many because every candidate's got the opportunity to answer. We're going to take the questions in blocks of 2, and we'll give priority to parishioners of St Clement. And the candidates will have each a maximum of 2 minutes to reply. I remind the candidates that's a maximum. They don't have to take the full amount of time. But a warning bell will sound 20 seconds before the 2 minutes are up. Now, if you catch my eye and I call you to ask a question, could you please firstly confirm that you will give us your name, confirm you are a St Clement resident. I ask you to make sure that your question is short and to the point. It's not for us to make speeches. That's for the candidates, which they have already done. And the question must be able to be answered by all the candidates. In other words, it must not be specific to an individual. The question must be able to be asked by all candidates. So I would ask anybody wish to ask a question, please. Anybody wish to ask a question? Mr. Pinnell.
My name is John Pinnell. I'm a resident of St Clement. Could I ask the candidates' views on what they would do to improve trust and confidence between the states and the voluntary sector? This disadvantages nobody because LUCE is the only candidate that's already answered the question.
Does anybody else wish to ask a question? It's going to be a very short husting. Gentleman at the back.
Shall I shout or?
Please shout, Mr. Bunting.
Okay, Tom Bunting, a resident of St Clement. Thank you, candidates, for all standing. It's very, very good of you. I'm sure I wouldn't be able to do this. I've been voting for 50 years for individuals, and very few of them have managed to get any of their sort of propositions through the states. So basically, I'm asking you if you're prepared to stand for a political party, whether it's a manifesto, and you get together with a few like-minded people, and you stick to the manifesto and you pull or toe the party line. A yes or no is quite sufficient.
I think we've got that, Mr. Bunting. Thank you very much. Senator Ferguson.
That's a bit unfair, having doing it twice. Right. Party. I think there are groups of like-minded people who do work together. And then, of course, you have the other thing where you bring a proposition, it gets thrown out by the Council of Ministers, and then 3 weeks later you find they're doing it anyway. It's the perils of scrutiny. Trust between states and the voluntary sector. I think the states need to be more upfront and honest with the voluntary sector. There is a feeling amongst the voluntary sector that there's a sort of privatisation of functions where I actually am chairman of Age Concern, which is why I'm interested in the well-being of the troisième âge, I think you'd call them. I call myself an oldie anyway, but I wouldn't insult you all by that. And I think that, you know, they're very dictatorial with the voluntary sector. You know, you're there to help us. And we're only too happy to talk to them and sort of try and get things going. So I would very much like more interaction with the voluntary, with the states. Unfortunately, we had, John was a coordinator of the voluntary sector setup, and then his funding got pulled, but he was doing a very good job at the time. So I would really very much like to get that side of it going again.
Mr. Maguire.
My own experience in the voluntary sector has indicated to me that the states rely too much on the voluntary sector to do the work. What they're doing is saying, oh, you're doing this work, we don't have to do it. Wrong. The voluntary sector is there to support and enable the states when the states is insufficient to do the job. But we shouldn't be doing the job for them. And this kind of thing is happening an awful lot. The other problem is that when voluntary people do come along and offer their services, a number of civil servants do feel a little bit overpowered by it. For example, Headway have bought this little mechanism to help people with strokes, to enable them to get their feeling back in their hands. And this is a standard piece of equipment on the mainland. The stroke department in the hospital couldn't afford it. We bought it. We offered it back to them as we're even happy to help with training. Oh, no, you can't do that because, you know, that's our job. Well, you weren't doing it. If you get the problem is you've just got to disentangle the thing where if people come along to help because there isn't enough money in the civil service purse, that's not a bad thing. It's got to be encouraged, surely. But at the same time, we mustn't let the states say, well, because you're doing it, we can now put the money elsewhere on something else, like, you know, maintaining the steam clock, for example, or something of that nature. Oh, as far as political parties are concerned, I've got nothing against anybody discussing and negotiating and coming to terms with anything. I personally wouldn't stand for one, though, because I believe I should stand on my own merits and my own word.
Deputy MEZEC.
Thank you. Mr. Pennell, where would Jersey be without its voluntary sector? It amazes me every time I have a particular constituency case where I have to find help for somebody who's in need, just how many organisations there are out there who people giving up their time and money to help people who are less fortunate than them. So the first thing we have to do is we have to value these organisations and the people who are putting their time to help people less fortunate than them. If the state is having to work with organisations in the voluntary sector, it has to do so with a degree of respect to those organisations and be open and honest with them, and when they're consulting about whatever changes are coming forward in state services or in the law, that those charities have notice of it and know what change is coming, and we must never take them for granted. I think one thing that would help many voluntary organisations that receive funding from the states is to extend the length of time that funding is guaranteed for. Rather than offering funding on a yearly basis, do so on a 3 or 5 yearly basis. That way it enables those organisations to have the certainty to know what they're going to be able to do so they can plan and so they can move forward. On party politics, no surprise here, but I'm a supporter of party politics, and I think that Senator Balash on ITV News the other week was absolutely spot on when he said that what it would do for voters is it would provide you with a degree of accountability and the ability to know where your candidates really stand. I've known it, I've been able to sort of spot things when you're on the doorstep meeting people where you gather that a voter isn't really of the same persuasion as you. Because I wear a party logo on my rosette, I can't lie to that person. I can't say, well, I'm a Conservative as well, because they know that that wouldn't be true. What you see is what you get with the party, and we have our manifesto, 33 pages long, which is transparent. And you may not agree with everything you see in it, but at least you know where we stand. And that's, I think, an accountability that I think voters would find more certainty from when they turn out to vote. 92 manifestos in this election. Be better if we had fewer with parties.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, Mr Constable, and thank you for the questions. Initially, charities, as Deputy MEZEC has just said, are greatly valued in the island. This is an island of philanthropy, and with the charities law, we will see greater philanthropy. We do need to listen and coordinate and work with our charitable sector to a greater extent. Service level agreements are becoming longer with charities, and that is a good thing, I think, because it offers greater certainty to those people, volunteers who are organising the functions that they provide for the community, and also obviously the financial commitments that are aligned with it. I saw for myself when working with the scrutiny panel how a charitable organisation running something like a respite home can actually provide much greater value for money for those people who enjoy the services than other provision can. And so I would be very prepared to work with the charitable sector. On the issue of parties, this is a tricky one, and one that I've thought about much and discussed many times with colleagues. If you go to the UK or any other political event around the world, you can talk to people, and when we say that we don't have parties here in Jersey, they all say, aren't you lucky? Because sometimes the party can actually take up a lot of a person's interest and time, keeping it together. Because just as we have to keep together 49 individual independent, apart from the 3 obviously members of the party, but the other 46 we have to keep ourselves aligned and work together, and that can be a difficulty. I do agree, however, that sometimes an alignment and greater structure around our thoughts and clearer working together would be a benefit, particularly at election time, because it would assist you, the public, to understand where we're coming from.
Senator Gorst.
Thank you. Actually, both questions are about partnership working in my mind. It's taken something like 10 years from when I first asked the states, when I was deputy, to create a charities commission. And the states has dragged their feet. We might wonder why that was, but we're now there. We've got a new charities commissioner, and I think that the voluntary sector is going to find that that really supports them in all of their operations in a way that they've never known before. There are some really good examples. I see some people around the room who've coordinated work between the states and the voluntary sector. There's good examples of delivering the disability strategy, the mental health strategy. I mean, one thing that we should all be proud of in Jersey is our voluntary sector and the number of people that come forward and volunteer. It's what really makes us that special place that we are. So working together, government with the voluntary sector, is really important. Control and Auditor General has done quite a lot of work looking at how government works with the voluntary sector and how we deal with arm's length organisation, and she says there's lots of improvements to be made. If we started making those improvements together with the Commissioner, I think we'll go a long way to addressing your concerns, John. I have always worked with anybody who wants to put Jersey first. I see, again, the benefit that an independent system of politicians brings to Jersey. You just have to look elsewhere around the globe. But equally, there can be benefits from party politics. Sam knows there are some areas where we've worked together and we've achieved change across the states. So I'm not against, in the future, us working more in alliances and where we find agreement, working to get it delivered.
Improving the confidence between the states and voluntary services. In the long term, many areas, there's no problem. But I would like to actually stress one, and that's the RNNI, would then become dictatorial, and people were laid off, and this island was put at great risk because we didn't have lifeboat cover here. As far as I'm concerned on that level, there should be more diplomacy, compassion, and compromise. You've got to talk about these things, and when a voluntary organisation starts demanding things and say, well, the state said, no, we will have to think about that, and they become dictatorial, that's the problem. So it's all about those three things. On the point of party politics, well, basically, I like to stand on my own merits, and when it comes to party politics, if I don't agree with what a party is offering, I'm not prepared to stand, and I'd rather stand on my own merits as an independent. Thank you very much.
Deputy Valois.
Thank you. Mr. Pinnell, with regards to the improvement of trust and confidence between the states and charities, I see it very much as a partnership, and it should be just that, a partnership. Voluntary sector provides sometimes some services that the states can't and won't do. And so ensuring that there are proper partnership agreements that are clearly represented and that the funds aren't taken away at every MTFP because there is an assumption that something is not needed. But it's also the recognition of the value from members of the states to ensure that they're valued, they're recognised and that they're needed and they're part of the system that we all live with and value and care for. In terms of Mr. Bunting's question, with regards to parties, I've stated this in the States. Ministerial government was brought in a very messy version of the Westminster model, and I've always stated that ministerial government requires party politics. And if we keep ministerial government, then yes, it would provide things moving quicker, it would have clearer accountability, and people would know where their vote is going to and who to hold to account. If you keep ministerial government, then party politics will have to come. Thank you, sir.
Senator Farnham.
The voluntary sector is hugely important. In fact, if we ask for a show of hands, most of us would have be working now, will work in the future in the voluntary sector. The percentage is much higher than most places in the world. But in direct answer to John's question, I think that certain parts of the voluntary sector have been victim to different political agendas. And what we must do as politicians is stick to our word. When we say something, we must stick to it. Yeah, we must. And that's a problem. So to build trust and confidence, we've got to start doing what we say a bit more often. I haven't done myself any favours there, have I? And Tom, the question I ask is, myself, is if or the statement rather I'm going to make is if the people of Jersey wanted party politics, we would have them. And we haven't got them. Well, we have. Yes, we have. We've had parties since the reforms in 1948. Every decade has seen different parties, but they've never really taken off. And the best effort so far, I think, is the Reform Party. And they have 3 members, and they're aiming to get more. But people aren't queuing up to join parties over here. And I think, I fought against, as the Chief Minister knows, and other ministerial colleagues, against collective responsibility on the Council of Ministers because it does not work and we should not be coerced into voting for things we don't agree with. You vote for us as independent people and that's the Jersey spirit and that's what I support. And I think Jersey, the states of Jersey should be a party and should start acting more like a team. Thank you.
Deputy Lafondre.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Pinnell. Jersey is incredibly well served, as we all know, by the voluntary and the honorary sector. And certainly in my experience of the past 20 years, I think, as Honorary Secretary of Levo, there have been times when we've been in front of a department or representative of the department in an unpaid capacity, and you feel they just don't rate you or value quite as much because you're in that voluntary capacity. And then sometimes you feel that actually you're then becoming an unpaid arm of the states, and there's just a kind of attempt to squeeze you into wherever the particular policy is trying to take you, rather than recognising the reason you originally created. And certainly in a number of areas, and this is consistent actually, not just in the voluntary sector, but what we've come across in scrutiny in a number of times has been a theme of the lack of consultation or the half-hearted consultation that's gone on. So proposals coming through, you get told at the beginning, they talk to you, and at the very end you get told, here it is. And actually what you want the middle bit, where they do work backwards and forwards, particularly with volunteers who are often professionals in their own industry or whatever, and actually discuss what you're proposing to do, and then come back. And it's an iterative process. And we're not doing that enough, and so the level of engagement isn't there. And that's something I would certainly be committing to changing if you decide to elect me. Mr. Bunting, I'm an independent candidate. We're an island 9 by 5. I agree totally with Senator Farnham. I don't think yet that party politics is yet in the DNA of this island. I think my big concern is that it can become a straitjacket. You are suddenly constrained into how you want to vote. And one of the matters that I really like about the States is that's the joy of working in teams to try and persuade each other to come round to a point of view. And that's part of the democratic process we have. So for the moment, we'll see what happens these elections as to how party politics takes in Jersey. Thank you.
Mr. Risoli.
Charitable organisations. I've always got an ear for people who look for help. So there's no question you would have my ear. But charitable organisations quite often exist because governments don't fund public services properly. They don't fund public services properly because some people in society here believe they're more special than others. For instance, you've got several hundred ISE companies, international service entities, the richest on the island, who believe they shouldn't pay their share of the electricity bill or the carpenter or the state. No, this is too much for us. The richest people on the island do not pay GST. And then you've got you introduce a social security and you put a cap on it, making a nonsense of the rates in social security. You have the same on the high street, some are paying tax, some are not paying tax, and you wonder why this island needs so many services. You're just producing mental health patients because these people, incumbent people, are driving this island mad. Well, that's enough of that subject. Now, going to political parties, no, we're not ready for the political parties because we have not been educated enough to understand what help is and what a handout is. We don't know the difference. I know because I have studied human behaviour and psychology for years, and I have had, 68 years old this year, a benefit of hindsight. This I've watched. I'm bored to tears. You must have absolutely accountable government. The truth must be on the table for you to make your choice.
Thank you, Mr. Risoli. Mr. Baudin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Constable. I'm not bored to tears. I'm just angry at the way things run or don't run. Mr. Pennell's question first. I think it's unfortunate the states seem to be tending to offload services that they used to provide onto the voluntary sector in some sort of attempt to save money. These services are often vital and they deserve more respect. Another problem that I've come across is the amount of hoops that the voluntary sector has to jump through, the number of the amount of legislation that it faces, and the states are not often, in fact quite often, not understanding the effect that has on organisations such as yours. Political parties, well, there are pros and cons. Other members of the candidates have outlined some of the problems. What I'm concerned about is, do we really want the constant confrontational aspect of it? Do we want the problems that occur with hung parliaments and things like that? My view is that our previous committee system worked fairly well. And in fact, it's certainly a lot better than the ministerial system we have today.
Scott.
Well, I've come across a variety of experiences between charities and the states. I've come across some like the Brain Tumour Trust, where now you actually will find in hospital a specialist who will say to somebody who's suffering from a brain tumour, we have this charity that could help you. And one of the things that has been a problem for some people who have needed help is not knowing that it's out there. So I am hoping that with these reforms that are being implemented in the state, in the public sector, that there will be more of an awareness there. There is a bit of a problem because, or has been, let's hope I will support every change in that respect, because you often will find that people working in the civil service are risk averse, whereas people in charities are go-getting, and there is a change of culture that needs to really merge the two so we serve the public better. I'm certainly supporting more of a partnership between the public sector, the private sector, and the voluntary sector. Party politics, well, it's not it won't solve everything. You can look at the UK to see how effective that can be, because I think more important is good leadership. And that's what I really want to support. If we've really come across anything in Jersey, it's an independent spirit. And what I like to see is more independent thinking in the ministerial system, because without that, you can't, if with people being over-dependent on the civil service itself, you're not properly representing the electorate. Thank you.
Mr. LUCE.
Mr. Pennell, you are supporting charities, and I think the whole island supports charities. This must be the most charitable place on earth. And really, at the end of the day, it's good to talk, and really government should be talking and participating with charities to make things better for everybody. So I don't really see what the problem is. There shouldn't be any conflict with government and charities. They should be working together. As far as party politics are concerned, it's down to you really, isn't it? You're the voters. To date, party politics hasn't worked in the island. I think there's a lot in party politics that's favourable. But it's down to you. It's up to you to decide whether you want to vote for a party. And really, at the end of the day, we will be led by you. You are the people who are putting the people in place in government, and it's down to you to decide how you do it.
PALLETT.
John, as you know, I've seen the fantastic work that you do at the St John's Ambulance, close at hand. So you know, I think the voluntary sector over here is incredible. I know today that the Chief Executive of the States, Charlie Parker, was meeting a senior representative from the charity sector. So I'm hopeful that things are only going to get better from a government point of view. I think with the new Charity Commissioner, that's also going to be the case. As I said, we've got an incredible charity sector. I'm a trustee at Sanctuary House, the Men's Refuge. I've been there since it started. And I've got to say that the help and support we've had from government has always been very positive. We're just about to head into a major refurbishment, and I've had to say that the support we've had all the way through that has been quite incredible. It's a charity that this island desperately needs and something that we should support. In regards to party politics, I think Sir Philip Ballas has already said that he thinks party politics is inevitable. I think under ministerial government, I think it is inevitable. Before somebody reminds me, I stood as a party member a little while back. I learnt my lessons from that, good or bad. But I'm comfortable as an individual. I've always worked as a team, I think, all the way through my life, through work, and in a lot of the pursuits I've taken, I've worked as a team. And I've got to say that the team I've worked with at EDD this time round has been a joy to work with. I think we've achieved quite a bit through that period of time. The only thing I think with parties, I think the opportunities at elections to put a full manifesto out and clearly state what you're going to do before you get elected, I think is a positive, something I'd support. So I've got no issue with party politics, and I think it is an inevitability, I'm afraid.
Deputy Bree.
The fact that you asked that question, how do we improve trust between government and the voluntary sector, shows the problem. There is a lack of trust, and that lack of trust is the lack of commitment that government will make for long-term funding for the voluntary sector. Government relies very heavily on the voluntary sector to act as a cushion, if you like, or a prop for a lot of members of our society. And a lot of work the voluntary sector does goes unseen. But the fact that somebody is asked, how do we improve trust, shows where the problem lies. Government will not commit to supporting the voluntary sector for longer than 3 or 4 years maximum, and that is wrong. We rely on them to a great extent. The argument could be made that government relies too heavily on the voluntary sector, and really it is the role of government to provide those services to those people in our community who need it the most. With regards to political parties, there is a logic for political parties. There is a place for political parties. Reform Jersey has shown us that. Whether it's the right thing for an island this size, I'm not sure. The problem is when you create a political party system under ministerial government, you immediately have an opposition. Somebody will take the stance of being the opposition party to government. I think we need to learn how to work together better rather than actually putting a barrier between cooperation between members of the states. So I will always remain an independent. Thank you.
Mr. Troy.
The voluntary sector. They do a great job, and my grandson and myself are great fans of badges at St John's Ambulance, and it's something I really enjoy. And we're very fortunate here because the voluntary sector often fills in the gaps where the government fails and do a lot of great work. And I think the government should be doing a lot more and giving a lot more support to our charities. I don't know how this connection works at the moment, how it's fulfilled, but it definitely needs support for the wonderful work that they do. Moving on to the political politics. Party politics are based on a lot of ideas that people sign up to a policy with some rules to support that policy, and they all will agree that that policy is the way forward. So party politics can't happen here. So don't be worried, because we just can't agree. That's all I have to say, thanks.
Are there any further questions? Gentleman at the back. Yeah, go microphone. Could you give your name, please?
First of all, thank you to all of the candidates, and I wish you well in the next 4 weeks, which is no doubt going to be a stressful and hopefully rewarding time. Thank you. My question is, and I haven't got one, but if I did have a magic wand, what one thing would you want to change? Now, be it a policy shift, a budget shift, or a law. If you were the one person who could make that change, and this, hopefully, is going to give me some insight as to where your priorities lie, what one thing would you do if it was just you? Thank you.
Anybody else like to ask a question? Gentleman here.
Norman Subray, St Clements. Norman Subray, St Clements. We've heard a lot about consultants get called in for this, consultants gets called in for that. The latest is Mr. Parker, Charlie Parker, with his magic wand. He was going to sort everything out Now he's had 4 members coming in to help him, and now we hear he's got another crowd coming in to help him. Why do we need states members? Let them all run the island.
Mr. Ocean, would you like to take that one, please? Or those 2 questions?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm not asleep. Right, if we were talking about waving a magic wand. Back in 2016, as you well know, I stood in the by-election. There was confusion on the paper, and I lost votes through it, and there was a lot of spoiled papers. Well, I have achieved a change in the law, because on the ballot paper you will see on the 16th of May, and before if you pre-vote, you will see the name Ocean Stevie prominently on that paper, and as an afterthought, my birth name in brackets as it should be. So as far as that is concerned, I've actually achieved that already with the help of a government department and a lot of hard work, I can assure you. What was the second question? Because I didn't even get there. Consultants, yeah. Why do we have to have consultants in the UK? There are plenty of people in this island quite qualified to do the job. After all, do you know what? These people go, great, and rub their hands together and think, they're coming to Jersey and we've got mug written on our forehead because we're going to pay them thousands of pounds when we have the people here who are qualified to do that job. Thank you very much.
Deputy Vallois.
Thank you for your questions. Well, if I had a magic wand, if you find one, please let me know. My main focus would be education, and in my manifesto I set out the areas where I think there are issues. I've got serious issues about our curriculum, about the way children are now being pressured at school, and also the expectations on academia rather than vocational. There needs to be a balance. They're equally of value to our economy and to our own well-beings. And so that would be my magic wand, that would be education. In terms of consultants, yes, we've had a huge habit of bringing in consultants over the years. But why do we need states members to do the job if we have those consultants? Well, it ultimately comes down to accountability. And the important thing is that we've had over the years an inability for whether it's ministers or states members, to actually hold senior civil servants to account because of various different issues. I was chairman of Public Accounts Committee, and every time an issue came along, that particular policy was changed, that particular financial direction was changed, and therefore there was no issue. I have every respect for Mr. Parker, who's come in. He's got a huge job to do with the public sector. We are way behind the times in the way that the States works. We need to modernise. And I believe that what he's doing with regards to the consultants for the public sector will, in the long run, draw out a great deal of benefits for the island.
Senator Farnham.
It's tempting to use my magic wand to say, well, I'm going to fix education or housing. But all of those sort of things we have the ability and the authority to do. We don't need magic wands to do that. We just need a bit more willpower, a bit more determination, and actually be able to put our differences aside to work together. So if I did have a magic wand, I wouldn't waste it on that. I would use it to cure all terminal illness in the world, I think. Well, if I had a magic wand, yes, I would. I wouldn't waste it on that. Yeah. Pardon? Or fixed condor, yes. Yeah.
No, get rid of them.
Have to be a good magic wand for that, I think. Consultants, yes. I'm not a big fan of consultants. I think we should use them only when we really need to. There is a place for them. And I think we need to give Mr. Parker the benefit of the doubt, because the investment he is making in consultants now, as we restructure the public sector, as we move forward, could turn out to be a very good return on investment. But I'm not a big fan of consultants. We must use them sparingly. Thank you.
Deputy Le Fondre.
If we start with consultants first, I think we do need to be very careful about the overuse of consultants. I think it's the hospital is cited as having spent something like £2 million to actually identify the site. But let's not go there. But relative to the most recent headlines, I too have got a lot of respect for Mr. Parker. And I think, you know, we desperately need public sector reform. And I would like to understand, before we start leaping onto the most recent headline condemning people, we need to understand how that public sector reform is going to be implemented and at what cost. It's got to be very clear we cannot have an open checkbook on this side of things, but equally, especially without knowing the outcome, but equally, it's got to be done properly. You can't just do it what the expression is on the side of somebody's desk. In other words, you can't have someone who's doing 3 other jobs and then trying to achieve change. That's where sometimes the excuse for using consultants comes in. But as I said, we've got to know the outcome. And on that basis, we can say, yes, the cost is justified, or no, it isn't. So at this stage, the jury's out a little bit. There was the comment in the JP recently. They've got to know about Jersey. I think there's a report done recently referred to the risk of flooding from rivers in Jersey. And that's a no. Now, Mr. Goodell, the magic wand. And actually, on a slightly serious point, I would go for actually rebuilding trust, public trust in the government. I think actually at this stage, public regard of ministerial government is low, and really we've got to try and change that, because that's at the heart, one of the things that's at the heart of everything we do. If we don't trust the government, you're not going to have any faith in anything of what we do, and then obviously you blame all the rest of us politicians who aren't actually in the government. But it's honest communication, it's improving the decision-making progress, and it's being clear. And I think that would be where I'd start. Thank you.
Mr. Risoli.
Yeah, I would reiterate that. In fact, if I had a magic wand, it would be to make the public understand here that without, first of all, financial accountability, pretty much everything you're hearing here is just hot air. Nothing will change. I've listened to this for the best part of 68 years, right? You need financial accountability to get rid of people who are abusing the system here in Jersey. Now, by removing them, you will allow people with integrity into the system because it's transparent. Then you'll have people who will produce policies. All we've got to do is then work together. 50,000 people working together can do an awful lot, which will remove your second problem of consultants. That's the key. We have to have fair policies, and you won't get them. You know that saying about walking through the eye of a needle? People at the top, people who get their money from the top, right? They're destined to be. They must support where they get their incomes from. So you have to bring this government to account. It must be transparent. It must be accountable. So the magic wand is give me your vote, and I'll magic the problems away.
Mr. Baudin.
Thank you, Mr. Constable. Well, this is a public gathering, so I can't really say what I do with a magic wand to the States Assembly, but I would like to get States members working together. It's ridiculous that ministers are running the show whilst others are left out of decision-making. Indeed, my manifesto majors on that. I'd like to, for a start, to move scrutiny members into the ministry so that they work as a team. I think a good example might be the planning minister and his planning applications panel. That should probably be a start. That, in turn, should rebuild public confidence in the states when they can see things actually working instead of all this controversy. Consultants, my view has always been if a senior officer is employed on a decent salary, he should be capable of either doing the job or delegating as necessary. He should not need consultants. Having said that, I'm glad that Mr Parker was on the case because the previous incumbent, as far as I can see, did very little in regard of that, taking that programme forward over the last few years. It's high time it moved forward, and I'm glad he's actually doing it.
And Ms Scott. Ms Scott.
So, with my magic wand, I would like to change the States Assembly. Really big time. I'd like to change its culture. I'd like it to be less us and them. I think it's ridiculous that scrutiny are treated as opposition. They have a role to play. I've heard comments actually made as if nobody's got anything to say that's useful if they're in scrutiny, which disappoints me. So I'd like to see more leadership. I'd like to see less of a boys' club. I'd like to see less cronyism. I'd like to see a more professional way of dealing with things, more transparency. I'd like to see, well, less wasting of money and less wasting of time. So I need a jolly big wand, and it's a lot of work to do, which is why I'm standing, because I believe this is a colossal task. No, you can't just leave it to Charlie Parker. You've got to actually involve us, but you need people who actually know what needs to be done. And I totally agree with you, Mr. Sivray. I've often thought, well, if you're just going to rely on these civil servants, these UK consultants, why don't we all just pack up? Oh, sorry. Why don't we all just pack up and go home? Why? You're paying money for us, for the States Assembly. Well, it's a waste of money if we don't actually just get in, show independent thinking, show an ability to oversee the civil service on behalf of you. And I'm not saying there aren't really good members of that civil service. In fact, I feel some of them may well be frustrated because of the way that it is. So I want to help make it better for you.
Mr. LUCE.
Mr. Goddard, if I had a magic wand, I'd like a big one. I don't want a small one, I want a big one. And what I would like to see is the States Assembly and the States members have respect for the islanders. And it would be lovely for the islanders to have some respect and understanding and appreciation of the States members, which we don't have at the moment. Mr. Sivray, there is a place for consultants. There always will be a place for consultants. But the important thing is if you bring in a consultant, listen to what they have to say. There's no point in spending tens of thousands of pounds on having consultants come to the island, and when they actually bring up propositions, those propositions are paid for and totally ignored. So there is a place for consultants, but basically having consultants is a wee bit of a cop-off for the States Assembly. At the end of the day, the consultant is the one who's the fall guy. But generally speaking, yes, I think with Mr. Parker, he is going to wipe the locker clean. Things are going to improve. But basically, we don't need all these consultants, and we certainly don't need a consultant for a skate park. Thank you.
Senator Pallett.
One thing I'd like to change, well, I think that's improving the quality of all islanders' lives. I attended the conference about 3 or 4 months ago just to look at how we could actually improve all sorts of areas of life. But I think one of the things that came out of that is something that I think is close to our hearts at the moment. That's giving all children the best start in life. I think with the new active strategy I'm going to be bringing in, that's going to be part of that. But at that conference, I met a lady called Elaine Wiley. You might remember the name. She's the lady that introduced the Daily Mile into schools in Scotland. She's in her 60s. She's absolutely incredible. But it's just amazing what a simple little program like that can do to the physical, mental well-being of young people. And it's that type of thing I want to see in the island so that we've got an opportunity to improve everybody's lives. In terms of consultants, my wife's always telling me off for judging people too quickly. I I like Charlie Parker. Do I trust him? Well, he's asked me. He put the brakes on Fort Regent when I thought we were getting somewhere with it. But I want to give him some time to achieve. I think we've got to give him that little bit of time to really get his feet under the table and achieve. In regards to my colleague here, he couldn't be more wrong in regard to the skate park. We need to do that quickly. We need to make sure that we can deliver it. You don't do that without people that have got expertise in certain fields. And the person we brought in had done it before, and she can achieve it quickly. We're going to lose the skate park in town. And if we don't get something back for young people, woe betide us, because it's not fair on young people. It's a great place for them to exercise. And frankly, they need somewhere to socialise as well. So we've got to get behind that.
Deputy Bree.
Very interesting question. Magic wand. What one thing would you change? Changing one thing is not actually going to change anything on its own. Everything is interrelated, whether it be education, health, schooling, housing. There is one thing, though, that I would like to change. I would like to introduce joined-up thinking from government. How many times have we seen announcements by government which seem to go against this concept of having joined-up thinking? One department doing one thing, another department doing another. That is a lack of joined-up thinking, but more importantly, it's a lack of leadership from the top. As to consultants, it's a very good question. It seems to be that there is a belief among certain people that no one in Jersey has either the ability or knowledge to do any consultancy role. I don't agree with that. I think there are some excellent people over here, not only working in the civil service, but also in the private sector, who are very knowledgeable. We need to reform the public sector, that is true. Perhaps the right people to talk to are those outside the public sector. But there are people over here with a lot of experience and a lot of consultants, particularly in the finance sector, who work on change programs with huge organisations. Why haven't we spoken to them? Instead, no, we have to get people in from the UK, because it would appear that our government doesn't rate the knowledge base that actually exists on Jersey. And I think that has to change. I think we have to look to ourselves and go, we can do this. We don't need very, very expensive consultants flown in from all over the world. We have the ability locally. Let's use it. Thank you.
Mr. Troy.
The magic wand question, I do like that. I think what I would wish for is that all the waste that's gone on in Jersey by our government, if all that money was to come back, it would be a wonderful situation. I don't think the economy would have any problem anymore. So that would be the wish. And as for consultants, the only time I've been fond of paid consultants is when I've been the consultant. And I think we've got terrific brains here that can solve any problem that the island has. And I would sooner see somebody do the job themselves, and if they get it wrong, hold their hand up and say, I got it wrong. But consultants, I'm not fond. Thank you.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you. The magic wand. I suppose, first of all, I would like to solve the problems in the health department because we've still got an outstanding union complaint about bullying and harassment. We need to sort out the funding, and there are quite a lot of problems with the dismemberment of family nursing. I would like also that sometimes the ministers, and certainly the civil servants, if they would just occasionally listen to states members who might actually know more than they do. And as a far-flung hope, I'd quite like to go back to the committee system because it was very inclusive. Everybody knew what was going on, and I think the public knew what was going on because their representatives told them. So, you know, it was really very much more open. Oh, and I'd like planners to comply with the island policy. Now, consultants, you only employ consultants so you have someone to blame if it all goes wrong. And if we're paying so highly with quite a lot of our officers, why are so many unable to undertake some of the projects? There are some consultants where we don't have the equivalent. And I did say earlier, ask how much it will cost and where will the money come from. I don't think we get enough of that either. You know, it's whether people think it's rude to ask what it's going to cost, I don't know. But I think, you know, one of the things you must ask is, how much is it going to cost? You know, does the outlay, the money outlay, justify the cost of the consultant? Much better. And I suppose the only other thing is I've just been cut off in my prime.
Mr. Maguire.
The very first email I got after I put my manifesto on Vote JE was from a young lady who was terribly disappointed in me and told me I was a time waster because I didn't have a proper manifesto. I was only interested in one thing. So I'm afraid I've already answered your question. All I'm after is that the civil service obey the law, because my argument is if they obey the law, then we can actually see if the thing works or not. Because until people actually obey, all the people obey the law, how are we going to know if it's going to work? That's my one thing, I'm afraid. As far as the consultants are concerned, I agree with Sarah. As far as I'm concerned, they're just a way of avoiding accountability. If you follow the accountant's recommendations and they're right, well, you take the credit for it. If they're wrong, you blame the consultant. And this is just unacceptable because it means that people are not doing what they're paid to do.
Deputy MEZEC.
Mr. Goddell, if I could change one thing in Jersey, I would want to see the elimination of poverty. We saw the statistics that came out with the Jersey Income Distribution Survey a few years ago, which showed that a third of pensioners in Jersey live in relative poverty. That's double the rate that it is in the UK. 56% of single-parent families live in relative poverty, and it's getting worse. And we've seen the stories about the rise of food banks. I've always been very lucky in my life, and I've been brought up to feel very lucky to have been brought up in Jersey, an island that I consider to be a paradise. And frankly, it plays on my conscience that there are so many people in the island who are so unfortunate and who really struggle to make ends meet. And ultimately, we as a society will have to pay the costs of that, whether that is the extra funding that has to go into public services, whether that's health, mental health, education, to make up for the fact that people have difficult circumstances in their lives. I think that should be our number one aim. If there were a little bit of magic left in this wand, I would then use it to try and address Mr. Sivray's question, which I think it would be great if we could finally deal with one of these issues that has been plaguing Jersey politics for too long, and that is the issue of the system of our government. How we've had all of these reports, people that have come in and said that our system is broken and that it needs to be made more democratic. I think if we were to get over that hurdle, we would get better quality governments and we wouldn't see this reliance on the consultants or people from the UK coming over to do that sort of work, because I think we would end up with better talent at the top of our government system, people who felt better equipped to challenge civil servants and challenge those consultants to make sure we are getting best value for money. You know, I don't need to trot off all the examples where this has failed, whether that's the £26 million to find out that apparently the best place for the hospital is where it is, whether it's the money on the aircraft registry with one aircraft, £4,000 a day on PR. But of course, sorry to break this to you, magic doesn't exist. The only thing I can offer you is my promise that I will work hard to try and address these issues on your behalf.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you for the magic wand, Mr. Goddell. I would like to use it to take a little leap into the future and take us immediately to a point that I hope we will soon reach, which is where Jersey becomes a place where every child will have the best start in life. You can see an alignment there with the Constable of St Brelard who shares that. I have that hope for every child because I want every child to be loved, well-housed and happy, so that they lead a productive and healthy life and they can contribute back to the island at a very high level in their future. So thank you for that. Mr. Sivray, the use of consultants is sometimes necessary, in my view. We do sometimes need to phone a friend. We need some professional advice, and it is absolutely right and proper sometimes to do that. Our civil service is very busy. We have a dedicated staff who sometimes are working exceptionally long hours and I'm very grateful to them for the work that they do to help us achieve our aims for the community. But we have tried public sector reform. I'm sure you'll all remember that was much talked about at the last elections, and we haven't achieved what we needed to achieve to properly slim down our processes and make the public sector more efficient. So I am grateful to the Chief Minister, who has actually made this happen and brought forward this team, who have gone in and done some deep work that has highlighted a number of issues that instantly will save us millions of pounds, and that can only make our system work in a much better and effective way for us all. Thank you.
Senator Gorst.
Thank you, Constable. I wonder if you'd let me have the last 5 minutes.
I have plans for the last 5 minutes.
In the Gorst household, we do have a magic wand in the dressing up cupboard. It's a pink one with a flower on the end. But I tell my girls that magic isn't real. We don't believe in magic.
What a letdown.
But if we did, but if we did, and because we don't, I'm going to try and strike it twice, like Deputy MEZEC. But if we did, out of everything that I've seen over the last 6 years, I would use it to put over all of those who suffered whilst they were in the care of the States of Jersey, that they might find peace and healing. Secondly, is connected with the consultants. I, together, Deputy Valois, helped recruit the Chief Executive to once and for all get to grips with, I read it every day, somebody said, in the JEP, about a dysfunctional government that is wasting money, that isn't serving islanders, that is working in silos, that isn't joined up. I remember going to visit a man on Jean Bart Lane when I first became a deputy, and he said, you've got to do something about government, they're wasting it, there's duplication everywhere, they're not working together. It's taken me this long to start to make progress. We are making progress, but one person can't do it. This is an organisation of 7,000 employees, £1 billion spent every year. I believe that we're going to find that the savings we make out of this programme that we're now delivering, you are going to be pleased that we finally got to grips with this issue because it's in everybody's interest. Thank you.
To get the best value out of this Hustings meeting, I've made an executive decision, which I hope the candidates won't be too upset about. I'd like one question. We'll have a quick fire round and give the members, give the candidates 30 seconds to answer, and there'll be one bell only. In fairness, in gender equality, I will ask the lady with her hand up here. Could you just wait for the microphone, please?
Hi, I'm Jackie Delahaye and I live in St Clement's. I would like to know, I've heard an awful lot of talk about sort of bringing in work permits and whatever. I really, really would like to know how you're going to do something about controlling the population before doing anything else. And every time I've come to one of these meetings, I get the certain people, and some of them are here tonight, say, we're going to do it, we're going to bring in work permits, we're going to sort out the population. You're not doing it. And no matter what figure you give me, it's wrong. Put thousands on top of a figure that you're going to say. That's what I'd like to know. Thanks.
Right, 30 seconds, please, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Baudin.
Thank you, Mr. Constable. As I said in my opening speech this evening, we have a population policy, but it's been completely disregarded for the last 10 or so years. We were going to stay at 90,000, now we're, 110,000, plus the people we don't know about. It's really not good enough. We have to have an immigration policy, and I believe also for those seasonal workers, for tourism and for agriculture, then we need to have the old permit system back, where I think it was 9 months, if I remember correctly, the people would come for the season, then go back again. Thank you.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mrs. Delahaye. Yes, there are immigration proposals on the table right now that are to reintroduce work permits, and I'm in support of that. Just to check that works with tourism and agriculture, but they sound reasonably positive so far. I would like to see that broadened to reduce immigration at all levels, and to maximise the way that we resource positions within our own community.
Mr. LUCE.
I would like to see people who are coming to the island to work have a job before they get here, rather than arriving off the boat or off the plane and coming into town and trying to find a job. They should have a job to come to. If they haven't got a job to come to, then we don't want them. And when it comes to the agricultural and the tourism business, it worked very, very well indeed that people came over, they did their 8-9 months, they didn't pay any tax, they scootled off, and their family stayed where they were, and we didn't have all the incumbents.
PALLETT.
Thank you, Jackie. I think you need to start with a migration policy, not end with one like this Council of Ministers have done. So I think that's got to be our priority. I'll pursue that if I've got anything to do with government this time round. Work permits, I think, but they need to be beneficial for all sectors. But we need to make sure that if we're bringing people in, that they only stay here for that requisite time and they leave, so we can keep our population at least at a reasonable level.
Deputy Bree.
Thank you very much. 30 seconds to answer a very complicated question. The important thing is, first of all, everybody in the working population has to have a work permit. Doesn't matter whether you're local, overseas or whatever. Everyone has a condition attached to it. For locals, they're unconditional. So everybody in every job has a work permit. That way we know who's doing what, where, who's working where. A total lack of a policy is not going to work. We need to have a firm policy on how many people we allow in. Thank you.
Mr. Troy.
I think your problem is going to be solved by the Brexit issue, because we may be having border control forced on us, and we will have to see who comes in and make sure they don't get illegally into the UK. So I think you're going to see some changes, and we need that policy that was talked about here, so that we know where people are and what they're doing. Thank you.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you. I hate to say it, but Guernsey have stabilised their population using work permits. I think we need to have a look at how they've done it. We need succession planning to use more local people. We've got plenty of them with a lot of brains. And I've already mentioned my support of work permits. But we need to get the migration policy in place, but we need to look and see how Guernsey have done theirs, because I hate to admit it.
And Mr. Maguire.
Work permits, I'm all for them. Anything that's, as one of the gentlemen said, nobody should be allowed in here without a job. Otherwise, what the hell are they doing here?
Deputy MEZEC.
If you have more than 30 seconds, go to www.reformjersey.je/manifesto, page number 10. You've got our policy there. Basically, if we're going to go down the route of work permits, it's got to come with three things. That's improving on-island training so people can climb up the ladder to take those jobs. Support automation, because that's going to help with productivity in the end, hopefully. And lastly, and this should go without saying, if you're going to set limits, you've got to stick to them.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you. A skills-based scheme that is simple to manage and one that doesn't just concentrate on high-value jobs, but what we need to fulfil the needs within our society. Also, I think that the problem may, to an extent, resolve itself with technology increasing and artificial intelligence. There will be actually a different call for skills within our community, and that will level out the incoming residents and the demand for people, but we do need to encourage.
Senator Gorst.
Thank you. Yes, as others have said, we have proposed a new work permit scheme which will limit the long-term detrimental impacts of a growing population, but it's about balance. It's about working with businesses, and we're going to have to work with businesses because they are growing. That's good for us because it's creating economic growth which provides for the social services that we all want to see. But at the same time, we do know that technology and we know that Brexit is going to bring changes in both of these areas.
Mr. Ocean.
Work permits implementation is a very important factor here in conjunction with immigration policy. Now, I'd like to see it extended far afield from the point of view of tourism, agriculture and construction, but based on the time that we need these people here, which doesn't mean 5 years or 3 years, whatever the case may be, and then once the work is completed, they leave the island. Thank you very much.
Deputy Valois.
Okay, in terms of population work permit, but I'd apply it to the individual rather than the businesses. So the individual was applied, so there'd be like a student permit or a work permit for a particular industry. And I would heavily invest with regards to the education side of things to upskill our population to coincide with that managing of the people coming in and going out. But in terms of numbers, you can't cap it unless you're counting in and out the people coming. Thank you.
Senator Farnham.
Thank you. I support time-limited work permits. We must ensure that tourism and agriculture have enough workers to make sure they can run and continue to operate sustainably, but without having a long-term impact on our population. But a word of warning, Brexit has changed things, and the demand for people leaving Europe is dropping drastically, so that will help us.
Deputy Lafondre.
Thank you. Yes, population should have been at the very top of the agenda for this government. It affects everyone. We all know that. So, Mr. Dullahay, you're right. We've not crossed the nestle on this. If you look at our scrutiny report, actually, we did a very high-level commentary, and actually there's a little bit on my leaflet about that. It's very clear, though, and we need good information before we can actually get to a proper sound decision, because you've got to take account of business, and we've got to know who's coming in across the entire spectrum and what impact they have on this island and what benefits they bring. We've let in 4,000 people in the last 4 years. It was meant to be 325 a year.
Mr. Risoli.
I think the tourism industry and the farming industry need seasonal workers. So I think seasonal workers which don't put a strain on locally should be allowed. But long-term tenants, the problem is the right-wing government who promised plenty of things, reduced the number of hotels, turned them into flats, and of course their friends want to sell the flats, and then they lowered the age of qualification, the number of and of course we got more permanent residents.
Thank you, Mr. Risoli. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes question time and completes this parish hustings. Can I, on your behalf, thank all of the candidates for their presentations and also for answering our questions. And I can add thank you very much for making my life as chairman very easy this evening. I think St Clemente will have found this interesting and informative because very few people have left this evening. So, thank you. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attendance. And if I could remind you, there'll be another hustings on Tuesday, May the 1st, for the candidates wishing to be elected as deputy for this parish. So thank you candidates, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.